Lesley Foxcroft, this is your first time in a villa by Andrea Palladio.
It's not my first time. I've been here a few times actually, but it's the first time I've made anything here, presented anything here. But I think it's a beautiful building, and it's, in a funny way, it's very modern. It looks very modern, even though it's an ancient building. The clean lines are very modernistic to me, and that's why I like them very much as well. And the space is just phenomenal, and all the grounds. I like it very much. Yes.
So how does this contemporary modern aspect of Palladio inspired your works here?
Well, in the main hall inside, I wanted to use it somehow just to be part of being in the building because of the history of it. And I know it's quite delicate building, so they don't want to use a lot of nails and things like this. So as soon as I walked in, I noticed the lintels above the door, and they're very wide, just about the size a lot of my sculptures are, or reliefs, or whatever you prefer to call them. And it just clicked straight away that that's what I would like to use. Simple, just use a simple ledge to rest the work on, and it wouldn't interfere with any of the architecture really, other than hopefully enhance it a little or change it a little. So yeah, I was pleased when I made the decision to make those pieces. So, yeah.
And how did you feel about the materials that are used in Palladio's architecture in this villa?
Well, that's something else that was surprising really, because I use MDF, generally speaking it's mostly NDF, but these pieces I made for the villa, the MDF was a especially lighter colour than normal. And so when I presented them here, they just worked so perfectly with the sort of tones of the stonework and everything in the building. And it just seemed to blend so well together. It was just exactly what I wanted. But it was all just by chance that the MDF was much lighter plain than normal. So it worked very well.
And this is, it might be also even more surprising in a way, considering the nature of your work, that has been very urban and urban related
Yes.
in the choice of the materials or in the destination.
Yes, yes it is, and it's quite nice to sort of be able to mix the two, you know, the very traditional and special to something that's very simple and everyday and, you know, workman materials really. So yeah, it was nice to be able to mix the two, I think. Yeah.
And how did you decide the curving of the pieces? Was it like proportional to some architectural element in the villa? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. It was to do with the lengths of the lintels, because I knew I wanted just to rest them on there. I didn't want any kind of fixings. So they had to be long, slightly longer than the lintels, and so that actually was the determining point. They had to be slightly longer so they could rest on there easily. But the bending was more to do with the ways that you can bend MDF, and I wanted to make them all slightly different, just to see how they worked really. So that's why they were all slightly different, but it was to the proportion of the doorways, very much so, yeah.
That is another feature in your work to me, this appearance of uniformity and repetition, which is never a real repetition, but it's more like a progression on the idea in the space, or with the material also with slight variations, subtle changes that completely change the perception. This also was the occasion for you to realize your first outdoor piece, which is the one that we are now standing in.
That's right, yes. And yes, it's quite, well, it's just a very new thing for me, obviously. But I had been thinking of making some outdoor pieces, but because of the materials I normally use, I knew I couldn't use MDF outdoors. And so I was thinking of more towards sort of metals. And I just love the idea of the galvanised because it is very much street furniture that you see every day, and it's mixed a little bit with the criteria that I always use for the materials. So I thought it was a perfect choice for me, yes.
The cubic allusive shape of
Yes.
this piece, which is open, is somehow reminiscent of the cubic volume of the villa in a
Yes.
way. I don't think there is such a direct reference for you, but probably there was some kind of connection that you wanted to establish by choosing such a diverse shape,
yes.
also not just material for this work.
Yes. Well, I think in a funny way it was because I normally do indoor pieces. I often use the architecture of the room, and because it was going to be an outdoor piece, I didn't have that reference. It was just an open space. So I don't know whether subtly I've more or less made myself an inner space, made myself an outdoor room, really. But that wasn't initial thinking, but after seeing the creation of the sculpture, I feel maybe that was mentally in my head a little bit. So these L-shaped pieces become an inner space, but a nice open inner space. And the L shapes, actually, I've used them before in indoor pieces, so it was sort of logical to use them again outdoors. So.
L like Lesley, or is it...
That's a nice idea, but it didn't occur to me until you just said it.
Also, I would like to speak more about the materials that you use in your work, because also in the pieces that you have installed in the basement, there is this very natural relationship between the walls and the pieces, as if they were made for the space, although they were simply reinstalled according to the space and reshaped in a way to this new setting. Maybe you want to say a bit more about this area?
Well, yes, I mean, normally indoor pieces, it's nearly always on a white wall. You know, like most galleries are white walls, most people's houses are sort of white walls or something similar. And so I wasn't too sure if it was going to work with the stone walls, but the pieces just seem to sit in there just perfectly well. And it may be to do with, you know, that they're sort of organic materials in a funny way, you know. And I was quite pleased that they sat well with the stone. You know, you're a little bit worried sometimes that, you know, it's too dark for the work, and will the work be able to hold its own, you know. But I think it seems to work. I'm pleased.
There is another element which is very important in your work, especially because of this very subtle way it unfolds into the space, which is the relationship with the light. And of course the light at Villa Pisani and in Palladio's architecture as a whole is a crucial element.
Yes.
How did you feel about this light in the main hall or in the basement? Because there are very specific trajectories of light that the architect envisioned for the building.
Well, I don't really know enough about what the architect actually wanted, but in the main hall, I mean, the light is just terrific, you know, because of, you know, all the doors and the windows, and it's just beautiful. But the cellar is something else, because it is quite dark in there, But actually sometimes when the lights aren't on, you walk in there, there's a sort of romantic sort of feel to the sort of cool, sort of slightly dark space, which I like as well. Yeah.